Okay, good.
All right. Good day and hi, SIG family. And welcome again to our case interview segment, Getting to Know You. With us today, we have one of our well-known SIG members, Dr. Joyanne Babb. She's an educator who serves as a lecturer in the Faculty of Education and Arts at the University of Belize, but is also a teacher educator and an independent service provider. Welcome, Dr. Babb.
Thank you very much for your welcome, Luna.
Well, I know you as Joyanne, so I'll be referring to you as Joyanne throughout the
interview. Thank you very much. I do appreciate that.
All right. Now, let me share with you a little bit about Joyanne so that you can understand where she's coming from. And she'll certainly be telling us much more as we speak with her throughout this interview segment. Joyanne is currently the co-chair of the Caribbean and African Studies in Education, SIG. And she has been the co-chair since, well, for the extent of 2020-2021. But she has previously served the SIG in the capacity of program chair on at least 2 different occasions, 2015 to 2016 and 2019 to 2020. I served as her co-program chair, and so we have a great relationship. But I know that her face is familiar to many of you. She's a doctoral Commonwealth scholar. She received her doctorate from the University of Waikato, Hamilton, New Zealand. And I'm not going to tell you about her research. I'm going to let her do so in a moment. But I can certainly tell you that she has presented at a number of major conferences in education. And these include the American Educational Research Association, to which our SIG belongs, the Academy of Management, the British Academy of Management, the biannual Narrative Research in Progress Conference, the University of the West Indies Biannual Conference in Education, the Alzheimer's Disease International Conference, and the AQR DPR Conference, just to name a few. Dr. Babb's publications include multiple book chapters and peer-reviewed articles in mentoring and tutoring, in the Journal of Educational Research, in the Caribbean Curriculum, Power and Education, and the Journal of Pan-African Studies. Now, Dr. Babb or Joyanne, I want to begin by asking you to share a little bit with us about your background as an educator, and then a little bit about your main research interests.
Okay, thank you very much for that warm introduction. As an educator, I started life as a high school geography teacher, and boy, that's what I wanted to be in life, a high school geography teacher. And so I taught high school probably for about 10, 12 years, but managed to continue going on to do a master's in education and then a doctorate in education, each time coming back to the high school level. And when in 2008, I had the opportunity to join the University of Trinidad and Tobago as an assistant professor, I jumped at that opportunity and really built on the research that I had done for my doctoral studies on how do teachers learn to teach. I'm a qualitative researcher, and so people's narratives and stories are what engage me in every way. You know, I want to find out, how did you become what you became? And so that's really the theme that runs through all the research that I have done. And as I listened to what you said, it was interesting to hear research in management. When I did my MBA, I did similar kinds of research. How did leaders, you know, see the development of their leadership self-identity, looking back on their career? So I like that sort of retrospective look. I did something similar with women priests, you know, looking back on their lives of how did you become a woman priest. So certainly there's that general theme through my research of narrative, understanding, being and becoming. And I suppose I do that kind of research because it's a quest in my own life to understand how I am, how I became who I am.
Okay. Well, you certainly answered my second question, which was why the whole interest in the development of identity, because you saw that running through your research in so many ways. But I wanted to ask you, why the focus on women priests? How did that come about?
The woman priest was actually a call, and this is one of the things that I need to say to listeners, that you really have to be out there and look for what's in your environment to develop that as research. So there was a call for papers, and I think the call came from one of our AERA case members at that time, and the call asked for something on faith and women priests. And at that time, I was a member of the Anglican Church, and I had a woman priest. And I said to her, "Would you be interested in doing this research?" And she was very interested in doing the research. Okay. And so it was a pioneering study, because at that time in Trinidad, we only had 10 women priests. And this is, early, probably 2010, 2011. And it was interesting to document that little bit of history, but document those stories about those women, how they became priests, because we knew that as time went on and the priesthood for women became a greater option, that those stories of becoming would be very different. So that's it. But we took the opportunity, if I could go on more with that story, because I just show you how jumping at an opportunity really helps you. So it was outside of education. It was within my own personal life an opportunity for research. And we presented the proposal to the narrative conference on that, because of course we were basing our methodology on qualitative narrative research. And it was accepted at the narrative conference in Alaska. So my priest and I and another colleague went to Anchorage, Alaska, and presented the work at that conference. So small, it's one of the things that I have always said, small opportunities, unusual opportunities to further the work that you're doing.
Excellent. Small but meaningful opportunities.
Sure. I hope to follow up. Now that I'm in Belize, I was just saying that now that I'm in Belize, and 10 years later, I hope to replicate the study in Belize.
Okay. Well, I wish you all the best there. Certainly. It sounds interesting. Now, I noticed in your CV that you had some work that you've done as a life coach. I believe you are a certified life coach.
Yes, I am.
And I wanted to ask, how does this work connect to your research? Or is it?
I wouldn't say, okay, let me think about that. I wouldn't say it connects directly to my research. What it does, it certainly connects to the work that I have when working with students who are becoming teachers, that I use that kind of framework, of goal setting a goal, looking at the realities around that goal, looking at the options, and then deciding on what you will do to achieve that goal. So I kind of use that coaching cycle within, whether it's dealing with students or even dealing with other colleagues as we, move through particular issues to work through in the job. The coaching training that I did, because I've had a career where I have been within institutions, and then there has been times when I have not been in institutions. And so I've used that sort of downtime to always increase my value in terms of training. And so that time when I did the coaching training, it was really to help me learn to listen. I mean, that was what that coaching training did. It gave me the opportunity to develop the skills of listening, which is a very important skill as an educator. And of course, asking the kinds of questions that bring people out of a little rut and keep pushing them forward. So it may be transferable to research, because we know as researchers, you have to listen to the data, and you have to keep pushing yourself and asking those questions to come to the ultimate goal.
Well, I can certainly see how it would help, given your focus on qualitative research.
For sure.
And telling those narrative stories.
Yeah.
Okay, so my next question is this. Can you share with us one of your most memorable research projects and why it was so memorable?
I think I still have to go back to my doctoral research as a most memorable project. I, as you said earlier, did my doctorate in New Zealand, and so I was 8,000 miles away from Trinidad. but the research was based on how do teachers, secondary teachers who are recruited with subject degrees and no pre-service teacher education, how do they learn to teach? And that was a personal quest, because when I started life as a geography teacher, yes, I had all the enthusiasm and this is what I wanted to do, but I did not have the pedagogical training. Now, I grew up in a home with parents who were teachers, so there was teacher talk all around me. But I never thought about that teacher talk as data. And going to New Zealand, I remember when I first got there, I read a book called Teachers Talk Teaching, where the person who later turned out to be my supervisor, Sue Middleton, Professor Sue Middleton, really and her colleague captured 150 narratives. And through that narrative data, they were able to tell the story of education and oral history of education in New Zealand. And that was one of the first things that I read, probably within the first week of being in New Zealand. And that really captured me to recognize that our voices, our stories hold so much data. And I think that realization was a real aha for me, because I then went on to interview 29 teachers over the period who started teaching between 1965 and the year 2000, which is when I was doing the research, to find out from them how did they learn to teach and to see if there was a change over time. It was very interesting, because through their stories, I was also making sense of my own story of becoming a teacher. Yes, so I think that still, even after all these years, more than 20 years, that particular project is my most meaningful one, because everything else was built on it.
Well, given my background has been similar, I had a similar introduction to teaching. So it certainly makes me want to go to look for that research, to learn a little bit about what your findings were all about. Would you mind sharing a little bit?
I will. It's written in a very narrative style. I remember when I was getting feedback, I shared it with a lot of my teacher friends, who said that they were able to see themselves because it was set out in a historical context, you know, the immediate post-independence, then the boom days in Trinidad, then the bus days, and, you know, so 4 periods between 65 and 2000. And you would I told the story of these 29 teachers sort of emerging on the scene. Of course, while the first, let's say the person who started teaching in 65 entered the scene, some of the other interviewees were not yet born, or they maybe have been in primary school. So there's this lovely historical bit through the entire paper. So you really get a sense of education at that time, but more particularly how these 29 individuals made the choice to go into education and to become teachers. So yeah, I quite enjoyed the book, and it is available at the UWI library, I suppose, electronically. But I know there are copies at UWI St. Augustine on it, and it's available on what do you call this? ProQuest. I think it's available.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Well, certainly.
I've had students take pictures and say, "Look, Miss, this is what we've come across." I know it's out there. Yeah.
I know how that